recording this event and putting it on our YouTube channel later on. And if people could keep themselves muted and keep the videos off, that would be very much appreciated. If you would like to ask a question, there is a chat button that looks like one of those little speech bubbles, which will be either down at the bottom of your screen, or it will be where the three little dots are. Just click on them and it will come up. And just select me and send a question to me during the show, or you can ask a question of everybody. And at the end of it, I will pick that up and I will call on whoever it is to ask their question. So without more ado, I will hand over to the Master to introduce our speaker for this evening.
Thank you, Liz. And can I welcome everybody to this webinar? I think it's the 6th or 7th webinar that the Glaziers Company has put on. And it's nearly a year now since we first went into lockdown on the 23rd of March last year. So without further ado, I'm just going to mention a few of our guests this evening. We're very pleased to have visitors from the Coopers Company. We have the Senior Warden of the Launderers Company with us, who of course share Glaziers Hall with us. The Master Glover is here with us this evening, and the Consort of the Master Waterman, and a past master of the educators. So along with everybody else, you are very welcome as guests this evening. And of course, a big welcome to all the members of the livery who have turned out to hear what I think is going to be an extremely interesting lecture this evening. And so I'll turn to our lecturer tonight, who is Rachel Mulligan. Rachel is one of our freemen, an artist freeman of the company. She joined the company last year. And in addition to that, she is an extremely accomplished stained glass artist and maker. And she teaches stained glass as well at her studio, which is down in Godalming in Surrey. And she is also an associate of the BSMGP, the British Society of Master Glass Painters, and she's a member of their council. And she and I know each other quite well because we have a little liaison committee between the Worshipful Company of Glaziers and the BSMGP. And this year is the centenary of the BSMGP. And so we're trying to put together some special events jointly with the BSMGP to help them celebrate their centenary later in the year. Hopefully there'll be real events because we'll be out of lockdown by then, God willing. So Rachel this evening has put together a talk which is entitled The Art of Stained Glass. And she's going to talk about her work, how she illustrates her glass in all sorts of different ways. And I know that she's going to be an interesting talk. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Rachel to talk to us. And then, as Liz has said, there'll be the opportunity to deal with some questions at the end. So over to you, Rachel.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Liz. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight. I wasn't at all nervous till you gave that introduction, but hopefully the nerves won't get the better of me now. So I'm going to try and share my screen. I'll just see how we do that. Here we go. So you can see the PowerPoint. Okay. I'm hoping that everyone can see that. Okay, well, this talk's entitled The Art of Stained Glass, because primarily I consider myself an artist. But in this talk, I'll be looking at the relationship between art, design, and craft. The three are entwined, and I'm going to just try and gently unpick a few threads from that. And I'll be showing you a selection of my work from my portfolio. and just going through part of the process with you. So here we go. I'll have to do it with the cursor. Okay. So the idea that art is made up of various elements is one that it has been around for a while. This is by Voisey, and he described the relationship as the head, the hand, and the heart. So the head was the creativity and the imagination. The hand was the skill and the craftsmanship. And the heart was honesty and love. I'm going to sort of try and refer to how I see it as the design, the art, and the craft as well as we go through. There we go. So this is the most recent thing from my studio. I made it for the British Society of Master Glass Painters Centenary, as Michael's alluded to. We're holding an online exhibition, which will be tied into a touring exhibition later in the year. And we're asking our members to make a panel 30 centimetres square. And this was my response. It's called The Wine Lovers. And it's an idea that's been knocking around in my head for quite a while, probably for a few years. And the idea initiated with a connection between two different things, and that's quite often how my work evolves. So the first thing was the glass. Now this is all mouth-blown glass. Some of it's from Lambert's, some of it's English antique glass, a few bits that I've been given and collected over the years. And it's such rich, wonderful colours. And I'm actually quite addicted to buying it. So last July, I went over to Lambert's to get some stock before, in between, lockdowns. And I came back with about 60 sheets. And last January, we'd gone up to English antique glass and stocked up there. And I'm now looking to go to Saint-Just next summer, if we're allowed to go. So if anyone has any ideas for Art Glass Addicts Anonymous, I'd be interested to hear. Anyway, here we go. So that was one of the ideas, was connecting the glass, and the other was the lovely colours of wine. I don't think that needs further explanation. It's fairly self-explanatory when you pour a glass and you hold it up to the light and you get the transparency and the bubbles or the lovely colours. So the idea began in my sketchbook, where I had my palette of colours, and this is after I decided to make it for the 30 centimetre square. That gave me the format to make it. So these are some initial ideas. I wanted a human element in it, some party, fun. I've written down there Easter egg, which is the idea that there's something small or hidden in it that people discover when they look at it. They don't necessarily see it at the beginning, but it's there and they find it. Stylized, quirky, and transparency. Those were my initial ideas. Then we get on to working it up into a proper design. And this is charcoal on very thin paper. And it's very fluid. I can change it quickly. It's working out where things are going. So this is more the design element. This was a very small watercolour I did to see how I was going to organise the colours, how I'd be cutting the glass. And this is the cartoon, I suppose, the one that I used to trace the paint from. And in this panel, I decided for the first time not to use any tone at all, but to do everything through line. I've been getting interested in lino cuts again during lockdown. So this was trying to think in terms of a line that's either there or it's not there. There's no mid-tones. So now we get on to the craft. Here's the glass that I've selected. As I said, I went to Germany earlier in the last year actually to buy some glass, and I came back with some of these lovely colours which are flashed. So they're quite hard to get hold of in this country because they're not stocked. And some of the bubbles were seedy, and I used some crackle. So this is the palette I chose. You also might notice that the grapes, that what will become the grapes, are very thick glass. And that was some slab glass that I was given, which I've chosen to use there. So I use a Dremel type tool to abrade the glass. And this you can cut quite deeply. So these very thick pieces of slab glass, I wanted them to have a three-dimensional element. So when you're looking at the actual physical panel, you want to run your finger over it and feel it. And this is the painting. I used a mixture of clove oil in this panel with the pigment, so it gives a nice shiny finish when it's fired. But I find it quite easy to trace with. It doesn't dry so quickly as water or vinegar. Hold on. And here you can see the difference in height between the slab glass and the flash glass. So this proved rather tricky to lead, but a challenge, should we say, an interesting challenge. And this is the leading. A few years ago, in about 2014, I applied for the Continuing Professional Development Grant from the Glaziers, which I was lucky enough to get. And I went and spent some time at Holywell Studios. And there they taught me how to strip the top off the lead and make it double heart, wide heart, by soldering another piece together. So I was crafting these leads so that they were fitted snugly around those thick pieces of glass. And here you can see a little bit of the texture of the grapes where I've engraved it. And this is the final panel again, but with daylight behind. And it's really daylight that activates stained glass and makes it such a wonderful medium to look at and also to work with. That the image is very different at different times of the day. When the sun comes through, it's transformed. So it is a kind of living, changing art form. I have a couple of house rules, as it were, with my work. And the first is that I only use mouth-blown glass. And that applies to my students who come here for a day's workshop as well. A complete beginner, they'll start off with this same material. And the other rule I have is that I try and avoid enamel. So all the colour is in the glass or it's stain. And by abrading the flash glass, the flash glass are the pieces where there's some white coming through that I've taken a thin layer off with that Dremel tool. And that's how I build up differentiation between the pieces of lead. So this was the latest piece, and this is something that has interested me for a long time, the vine. This is a particularly lovely piece of stained glass from the V&A that I remember seeing when I first started my stained glass journey back 30 years ago. And the medieval designers, we don't know who the artists were, but they were certainly, they had the craft skillful element and the design, the way this is put together, the spaces are filled, and also the artistic intent, I think, of telling a story. So vine's cropped up in a few of my panels. Sorry, there we go. And this was again done at Holywell when I was there on my placement. It's a watercolour study of part of the west window at Wells Cathedral that was being restored and conserved at the time. And I was lucky enough to work on it, cleaning a little bit. I cleaned a small area of one of these panels, but I could also just spend a lot of time studying it. The way these grapes are, well, they almost look like blackberries, but the leaves have a kind of boss feel, and those little heads of the lions, it's really quite stunning. So I used the element of the vine in this panel, which was one of a series that I made. And the idea for this came from linking the two thoughts, really. One was the year, the changing seasons, and the other thought was a lifespan. And I chose the Shakespeare All the World's a Stage to the Seven Ages of Man, basically, to accompany it. And I used a specific character so that it would have a kind of authentic feel. So this is my dad here in red, and it depicts, each panel is a sort of era of his life. So this is high summer, I would say, and there's my stepmom there in purple, and my two brothers and my sister in the pushchair. And the vine tells the story of the year in the border. So this is now late summer, early autumn. And in the picture, my dad's a head of English at Pimlico School, and I was trying to evoke the 80s. So this rule of not using, or try not to use enamels, if you take the Rubik's Cube there as an example, it's one piece of glass that's red with a red flash on white. So I've engraved away the white and the yellow, and then the silver stain gives the yellow colour, and that is on one side. And that piece of glass is about 1 centimetre square, or perhaps a bit less. So when my son saw this, he was horrified. He said, "That's not a Rubik's Cube. The yellow's opposite the white," or something. I don't know which way around it was. But to me, it was more important to evoke the Rubik's Cube in the era, rather than to be accurate with the colour. I don't suppose anyone else has noticed that, but there we go. And here we've got the sort of autumnal colours coming in, and it's now my dad's retired and is writing a play, and he's involved in acting and has another life in his lean and slippered pantaloons. These are all on my website if anyone wants to see them more. I've only included 3. And there's the set backlit. So another theme that kind of runs through my work is the S shape. And here we have our good friend Burne Jones on the two outer ends, and the lovely Mary from the Stained Glass Museum, all of which have this gentle curve in them. When I'm sketching, I am drawn to those figures like that. So some of these are done on conference or exhibitions. This was at the Glaziers Fair a few years ago. Derek's panel that he was showing. And again, the two outer ones are done on conferences where I've just had, I don't know, 20 minutes to do something. But the middle one was done at the, again at Holywell, when I could spend a couple of hours on a sketch, which was excellent for learning. Just have that time to absorb it. And this was again from Holywell. It was, at the time they had a Harry Clark panel, very small, about 10 inches, that was in to be looked at. And I had it in front of me. So the first one is the original, and then the next two are copies I made of it in glass at Holywell while I was there, which are just so far from the original, but I learned a lot from doing them. The brushwork, his brushwork was just exquisite. Anyway, that original panel I think sold for about £60,000 in auction just shortly after that. So here are some of my figures that are curvy. Now I found this while I was looking up that Foisy words at the beginning, and I just loved it. I thought, wow, that is so beautifully designed, the way the tree curves and the birds. It just tells a lovely little story. And I'd used the same idea in my Labours of the Months, which I made quite a few years ago now, that are in Godalming Museum, where the scarecrow is not having any effect on the birds at all. Just getting on and eating the plants. So there's more of those on my website as well, if anyone's interested. This has been an influence to me over the years, The Country Diary of an Edwardian Lady. I was given it when I was 14, and I still refer to it quite regularly. Just beautiful drawings and watercolours. And this little blue tits appeared in a few of my panels. Those are 3 of them. The one bottom right is also in the Labours of the Months series, and the other 2 are private commissions. And I thought I'd show you a bit of heraldry, because I do enjoy heraldry. The animals are so quirky, and in a way the art input is much less, because the design is already there, and it's really a case of interpreting it, choosing the right colour, working out how it's going to fit in the how the lead lines are going to go and that kind of thing, and designing the border. So this is Hazelmere Town Hall, and the lovely sort of purple and gold based on the colours of the heathland in Surrey. There's another coat of arms for Tyndall newspapers in Farnham. And one for Hurtwood House. Now this is a project, again, with not so much artistic input, but I was certainly learning a lot about the artistic side from doing work with this. It's from some glass from Charterhouse School. It's Clayton and Bell glass. It had been taken out of the school in the 1930s and stored, and then been involved in 2 fires. And at the time, a couple of years ago when I was contacted, it was virtually on its way to the tip. It was stored in the archive, in the cellar of the archive, just sheet upon sheet stacked on top of each other to knee-high depth. So we took it all away, boxed up, so it was stored properly and flat, photographed it, cleaned it and photographed it, so the school have a record of what was there, and then got to work just trying to make something out of bits that were going to be thrown away. So this one, there's about 80 panels like this, or in a worse state, that I've got in my studio now from there. But this one has just become a panel and is going to a house in Suffolk. So we've put a border, added a date, that's it, with the daylight behind. And it looks really splendid, I think. As I say, there's lots more where that came from. So it's just been an interesting learning process for me to see this wonderful painted Victorian glass and do something with it. So when you're working on a commission, the emphasis is very different from doing exhibition work, where obviously you're setting your own themes and doing what I want to do. It's about taking into account what the commissioner wants. And in this case, this was a house in Highgate. They had owls that they could hear from their garden, which really surprised me that in London you could hear owls. I mean, I'm 5 minutes walk from the countryside here and I've never heard them. So the owls and the mulberry tree, and just a rather nice project to work on. Nighttime, I've done a few nighttime scenes now, and they give quite a sense of drama to a window, because of the dark and then the pinpoints of light. So these are the 3 panels. When they were fitted, this is just taken on my phone, so it's not a great photo, but the wall behind the window is red brick. And then with the sun coming through, it completely changed the colours. So that was quite a surprise. But as I was saying earlier, in different lights, it will look very different. And this is another commission for a house in Surrey. They wanted something to do with the brambles. So this was all the hedgerow kind of animals that live with the brambles and off the brambles. So there were 3 panels. Again, a few little hidden things here that might not be obvious at first. There's a cobweb there and a little ladybird there. Hopefully things that people will see after, they might not notice it at first time, but when they're living with it, they might pick them out. There's a little bumblebee at the bottom of the bramble flower there. Now, this was a project that I worked on in 2019 for the Royal College of Nursing. And it brought together quite a few threads that I'm interested in, one of which was teaching workshops. The RCN wanted nurses to be involved in making a final piece of art, which was all about the emotions in modern nursing. So I ran 3 workshops, one at the Stained Glass Museum in Ely, one in Sunderland at the National Glass Centre, and one at Watts Gallery just up the road here. And then I did a few more top-up ones in my studio, so we had enough pieces. So these are made by nurses who have, most of whom had very little experience of glass, or even of art, actually. But I incorporated the panels into my artwork, which I designed in 3 parts. It's for an exhibition, so it sort of brought together the exhibition work and the commissioned work, because it was very much about having the input from the nurses and from the RCN, but also my ideas that I brought to them. So this was the first panel. And it was about the beginning of life and also about nurses who travel from other countries to work here. There's some detail. And this is the middle panel, so this is kind of middle life. This is mental health nursing. Again, the pictures in the border, the nursing pictures are done by nurses. And the thank you messages are by family who've written messages, and I trace their writing. And this is the final one, which was inspired by the community nursing that my stepfather received, and the care of that my mum gave as well. So while he was ill. And these, again, little panels that I tried to make it to look like a quilt. So just a few more commissions that I've done recently. This was done last year, 2020, during lockdown for a 50th birthday. More blue tits there and other birds. This one was also 2020. It was commissioned by a retired couple who wanted to remember their family who'd died, and so the stars represented different members of the family, and they wanted their dog in it as well. So that's there. Another nighttime scene, and actually my next commission is also a nighttime scene. So. And then also during lockdown, I did a series of work inspired by these stained glass panels. Well, these are watercolours that I made of the stained glass panels, but they're by Charles Payne and Daisy Luther, and they're from the 1920s. And I just loved the simplicity of the design, that the real economy of the figures and the storytelling in them. So I found 4 of them. If anyone knows anything about the rich man, poor man, beggar man and thief, do please let me know. I'd love to see them. So this is my version, and it's all about the community efforts during the pandemic, and a kind of tribute, really, reflecting the times we've just lived through. So here we have Tinker, who's got a hardware shop, ironmongers, and is clapping for the NHS. We've got Taylor, who's making some scrubs. Soldier, who's building a Nightingale hospital. And Sailor, who's working on the cruise ships. Rich man being cared for by the NHS. And I did this just after Boris had come out of hospital, so there might be a slight resemblance. And poor man is a cleaner in a care home. Beggar man is being helped by the community fridge, has fallen through the cracks of furlough and the self-employment scheme. And well, we can see what the thief's doing. He's stealing the toilet paper and the hand sanitizer. So I was mentioning earlier about lino cuts and how I wanted the style of the drawing to be more like a lino cut. So I did these as well. This series is currently at the Stained Glass Museum in Ely, the panels and the lino cut, which is obviously shut at the moment, hopefully opening in May. But if you want to go and see them, they'll be there till the summer, but do check first to see what their opening times are and when they're allowed to open. I also did this lino cut during lockdown, which was inspired, well, taken from really this design which I made in 2014. This was inspired by the artists and poets at the front who, in the Great War, who came back and wrote their poems and did their art and helped us understand the war in a way that sort of transcended what their experience was. So the soldiers are hidden in the poppy. And this is the last one. This is called Water Music, and it was inspired by Handel's Water Music. And here I was linking the fireworks that are often associated with it. And when he first had the premiere of it, I suppose you call it, on the Thames, there were fireworks going off, and at the time St Paul's was being built. And if you look carefully at the water, you can see the elements of the music in the River Thames. So I think that's about all the work I'm going to show you. It's quite a lot. I've quite whizzed through, and hopefully there's a bit of time for some questions. There we go. That was another panel I made during lockdown, past for a panel as well. So it's been quite a busy year. But thank you for listening, and hopefully there'll be some questions.
So thank you so much for that, Rachel. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you very much indeed. We do have a few questions. So if I can just, can I ask one first on behalf of everybody, which was, if people have been making screen grabs during your talk and your work is absolutely irresistible, is it okay if people want to post them on social media or whatever? Is that all right?
Well, yes, definitely. You know, I take the view that the work's done, it's out there, and you know, it's left. So yes, please do share.
Thank you very much indeed. So first of all, I have a question from Sophie Hacker. If Sophie would like to unmute and turn her video on and just ask, which is about the difference between your styles in your own work and your styles when it's a commission. Sophie, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Liz, and thanks for sending me the link for today. Yeah, Rachel, I just noticed quite a strong difference in your painterly technique from the work that you do in the studio to the commissioned work that you've just shared with us. And I was just curious to know whether that's something that is kind of client driven. Is it that the clients require that more, I mean, controlled, for want of a better word, style of work, or is it something that you naturally gravitate to when you're making commissioned work, as opposed to the much freer, slightly more fluid sense in your studio pieces? Thank you.
Well, it's not an intentional change. I suppose it's whatever each piece demands. And it's only quite recently I've been moving away from slapping a load of tone on and scraping it off, which I do love doing, to try and get a more linear style. So the next commission might be more linear. I don't really know yet. Hopefully when the client commissions me, they want a piece of art from me that is an expression of my likes and interests, and usually people are happy for me to have quite a lot of input into it. So it's evolving. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That's really helpful.
Thank you. So Kate Mason has got a couple of questions. Kate, if you would like to turn your video on and unmute and decide which of your questions you would like to ask first.
Oh, hi Liz, sorry, you're a bit muffled there.
Which of your questions would you like to ask first, Kate?
Oh yeah, and I appreciate there's quite a lot there. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for fantastic presentation, Rachel. I suppose they're all sort of linked, really. So maybe the middle one is the one to ask. Do you think that contemporary stained glass artists, and indeed the arts, the crafts form, sort of in its wider, do you feel that it's overlooked within the wider sector, that it's underrepresented, maybe not really understood, undervalued, people are not really understanding it, just seeing it as, oh, well, it's just what people do and in it for churches, that sort of thing?
I do actually. It's such a beautiful medium. I think it should be right up there with in galleries and collectible, and it gives so much joy when you have a piece of stained glass. So I think my goal is certainly to try and infiltrate the art world somehow, get my work in galleries and try and break down a few of those things. It is hard to frame and hard to exhibit, and I've worked a lot on developing really beautiful frames with light boxes that are removable, so it can either be shown with or without, and make it easy for people to see. But I suppose the other, if you're talking about galleries versus commissions, the other element is that a lot of people want an input into the work. So when you're trying to sell it as an art piece, you just want people to buy into it as they would buy into a painting or a Banksy or something, that they want it because it is the artwork.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we've got time for another question. And Kate, you also had a question which was to you, Rachel, about whether you enjoy the research process. And if so, as much as the creative process, or how do you balance them?
Well, I'm just so pleased we've now got Google, because it makes life so much easier. Google Images. I remember when I was starting out, probably 30 years ago, I just spent ages in libraries in the children's section, just going through books, trying to find pictures to reference. And yes, it can be quite fun just to go through. I tend to have the idea first and then look up the image that I want and then use that and adapt it and just have it as a reference, really.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And I'll now hand over to the Master, Michael Dalton, to thank you properly on everybody's behalf. If you'd like to unmute, Master.
Yes, thank you very much, Liz. And a big thank you to Rachel for an absolutely fascinating talk. Been sitting here just spellbound, Rachel, by the variety of the glass that you are involved with and produce. And I think the way in which you bring all these different things to life through the glass is just fantastic. So I'd like, on behalf of everybody, to thank you very much for the talk this evening and for giving us such an interesting little insight into what happens in your studio. Thank you very much indeed. And if people could applaud, if you've got to just have a little round of applause. Now, before we go this evening, I just want to give you a trailer for the next webinar in our series, which is 2 weeks today on the 25th of March. And the title for the event is Artist, Art Consultant and Architect, Different Perspectives. And this is a joint event which the Worshipful Company of Glaziers is getting together with the Worshipful Company of Chartered Architects in order to bring this webinar to you, which is going to be a discussion about how glass and architecture come together and the processes that are involved in getting people to work with glass in architectural development and work. And we've got 3 speakers who are on the panel that night. Ellen Mandelbaum, who's an internationally known architectural glass and artist from New York. Andrew Moore, who is an art consultant and is very much involved in bringing artists, stained glass artists, into architectural work. And then we have an architect, Jonathan Louth, who's from the Worshipful Company of Chartered Architects, and he has a special involvement with work in churches and cathedrals, and has been involved particularly with the Roman Catholic Cathedral in Southwark and other buildings, that type, church buildings. So we hope that this is going to be a discussion that people will find interesting and informative, and we'll look forward to seeing, I hope, many of you at that event in 2 weeks' time. So it only remains for me to thank you all for coming here this evening, to thank our clerk for enabling the technical side of things to be managed so professionally, and thank you again to Rachel for joining us and giving us such an interesting talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.